So you're probably watching this video because you yourself are a musician or you want to become a musician and you feel like you want to take the career path like I did and you want to really try and do your best, potentially playing in some bigger bands, tour the world, and live the dream pretty much. I've ended up joining some of the biggest bands in my country, New Zealand, and I've had a really good run being able to record on a lot of great albums with top end producers. Now, you're probably wondering, was there a secret formula to the success? Well, let me tell you this. If you think there is, then you're wrong. But there is one thing that I did throughout the whole time I was trying to do this musical path, and that is I was obsessive. So the first thing I did when I started drumming was getting lessons at the age of 11. Didn't really think it was going to be anything too crazy. Just kind of wanted to learn an instrument. My brother was playing guitar, so I ended up choosing drums. So when did my musical career start? Well, I guess you could say it's when I started playing in different venues, these smaller bars around Auckland City. I had my first proper band called Final Eve with my best friend from high school. And we weren't actually old enough to play without a guardian. So what our parents did is they would ring up first and they would say to the venue, we are allowing our son to go in with this band and play. They won't drink. They won't cause any problems. And they actually let us do this without them even being there. So here we were on the weekend, a Friday and a Saturday. We were performing. We were playing our own music, a couple covers here and there. And we were just out to to do it. And what a rush that was. We really felt inspired. Other bands would hear us play. They were a lot older and they were actually quite impressed. And they would tell us, wow, you guys are really tight. We could tell you put in a lot of hard work and we would love to perform with you some more. So what we would actually do is end up going backstage, networking with these musicians, being ourselves, but also trying to, be cool and, get along with them, have a bit of a laugh. When we were old enough, we'd have a drink and just pretty much celebrate the fact that we shared the stage, we did our gig, and we told each band and each musician what we liked about them. We told them that we would like to play with them again. And we told them that we want to keep improving. Any advice you could give us, we would take. And that's what we would do. We would try and always build our stage presence up. We tried to create better songs that had, a better composition, more intricate parts, but also more sections that could groove. And we would try and cater to the crowd. What we noticed the crowd had a better reaction to, we wanted to do more of that. So it was a lot of participating with the musicians, but also with the crowd and trying to get some kind of connection going. And that's what really started to build this community we felt a part of. And that's one thing I realized is you need to create a community with the fans and with other musicians. And that's what we focused on doing. So fast forward a few years, had been in the studio a couple times, did some recordings. We actually didn't end up liking what we produced, so we kind of hesitated to release it. And now looking back, I wish we did put out these recordings and whatnot, because, it's never going to be perfect. You just have to get what you can, the best out of what you do, and just keep improving every recording that you do. And every record, it gets a little better. But we had high standards. We looked up to a lot of these bigger bands and we really wanted to be on par with them. But we didn't realize that that takes time and that takes a lot of money and good studios, good producers. And at that time, being 17, 18, we didn't really have much of that. So we were kind of wondering why it wasn't as good as these other bands. And like I said, we didn't release everything we did, but we did learn from these recordings. And then one thing happened that was really crazy for me. The thing that happened was I was at high school at the time. My favorite band was 8 Foot Sativa. A lot of my friends loved that band. and we're actually getting guitar lessons from the bass player and the guitarist in the band 8 Foot Sativa. And what do you know? Their drummer had stepped down and they needed a new drummer. Well, these friends of mine told their guitar teachers, hey, there's this kid at school named Corey Freelander. He loves 8 Foot Sativa. He's good at the double kicks. This guy might be a possible candidate. So they put my name forward and I got a call to audition for my favorite band. I couldn't believe it. I was so nervous. Here I was still in my school uniform. So what I did is I waited for them to turn up. I had practiced 3 or 4 songs that I was working on. I would play the songs over and over again leading up to this with my headphones on, listening along, trying to drum along. And for me, being quite a loud drummer, I pretty much converted a pair of earmuffs with some headphones I had, kind of circular ones with little speakers on each side. I ripped them out, I put them in the earmuffs, and that was my custom, set up because at the time I didn't have much money. So I worked with what I had, bit of DIY, when you're starting off, and just a hunger for getting the job done. So I'm playing along to these songs. I'm not perfect with them, but I'm working on them. I'm trying my best to keep up. I'm trying to stay in time, trying to learn all the fills. And I got to the point where I felt, this is as good as I can get it. I better, get ready for them to arrive. So they arrived and I showed them 2 of the songs. And what do you know? They said, that's okay. That's enough. We will let you know. And they left. And I had thought I'd ruin it. I thought I messed up, didn't play very good. I was certain I lost the job. And then I got a call within like 15 minutes and they said, I'm in. And I could not believe it. My favorite band said yes. I'm now the new drummer. So that's pretty much a lucky break for me, being 17, getting to join my favorite band. And here I was about to launch my first debut, doing a world tour with 8 Foot Sativa. I think the way I got that was just, really being passionate, practicing really good, telling all my friends how much I love this band, and having these friends of mine luckily get lessons from these guitarists and 8 Foot Sativa. So that was a lucky connect. But I also made sure I was prepared and I went in with a good attitude. And I felt like they could sense this energy I had of excitement, able to just do what they needed. I wasn't complaining. I wasn't, a negative kind of shy person at the time. Obviously, I was nervous. So I put on my game face and I just, did the best I could. And they saw the potential. Sure, I wasn't perfect. Sure, I had a lot of room to grow, but I think they saw that opportunity that I was appreciative of. And, they accepted me and I gave it my best shot. So that band was pretty good for me. Uh, right off the bat, here I am feeling like I'm living my dream. I'm doing all this stuff. And that led to more opportunities, more recordings. I ended up joining a few other bands. And every time I got associated with these musicians, I tried to really show them that I was going to push the band forward by always being willing to put in the time, put in the effort. I had all the gear I needed because I had saved up a lot of money and I had spent everything I had on, a new cymbal, a new piece of equipment, some nice headphones. And I wanted to be professional as I could be. And that was one thing I always strive for was being my absolute best. And to do that, I needed to be, well rehearsed. I needed to have good equipment and a good attitude. And if you're that guy or that girl that isn't really putting forth a good attitude, if you're that person and you're not putting forth a good attitude, I don't think people are going to want to work with you. And this whole time, I was always happy to socialize, happy to introduce myself, have a good laugh, not be someone that's hard to deal with. And I think that helped me along the way to really be a likable, charismatic musician that people wanted to work with. People said, I was a cool person to talk to, and they saw the passion in my drumming. So I always did every performance like it was my last. I put everything into it. And if I messed up or made a mistake, I try and recover and not let it get to me. Sure, I was always wanting to improve and do better, but I always said thank you to everyone that said, well done, that was a good performance. And I'd always try and give them some nice compliments back if they had performed with me. Or if I noticed they were in the crowd, I'd say, hey, I saw you out there going hard to the music, moshing. I like that. What's your name? And I always tried to ask for their names and always said, nice to meet you. Are you going to come to the next show? And we always had another gig lined up. That was one thing we focused on is once we were playing a gig, we had flyers that we would make ourselves, giving them to the crowd and other musicians saying, hey, if you like what you saw, we're playing at this other venue in 2 weeks. We're doing this here. So we're always working towards the next thing. We always had something lined up. Something else was able to be advertised. And one thing I also realized is I really put in the work. Sure, a lot of it is contacts, being lucky, having a good attitude. But for me, I didn't want to fail. I would practice that song 100 times if I needed to and just keep going, give it everything I could and always try and add something a little bit unique to my performance, whether it be a technical fill, an extra little piece on the cymbal that I'd add in, like an accent or a little additional effect symbol. I was always trying to make it something cool and interesting. I didn't want to be too boring. I felt like if I wanted to stand out, I wanted to do something that was different, but I also knew when to hold back. If it wasn't that good and I was still working on it, I may not try and pull it out of the bag that gig, but I would always try and get to a level where I felt, I could fail on this little new additional part I'm putting in, but I'm going to try it anyway. And if not, I know what to work on next time. But if it was nowhere near ready and it was quite sloppy, I wouldn't risk it. I was always kind of feeling out the performance. If I'm not playing my best, maybe hold back. If I'm playing really good, hey, my confidence was up. I would try and throw some crazy improv in there. Another thing I wanted to do is always learn from the best. And lucky for me, I had a really good drum teacher at the time who was someone I met at Drum City, where I first started getting lessons in heavy metal, double kicks, all these kind of things that I didn't learn in my first few drum lessons at these music schools. I was learning it from Drum City from Michael Franklin Brown. So if you're watching this, Michael, big props to you. You were a big influence on me, and I appreciate you, what you did for me. And go check out his bands. Pluto, Head Like a Hole. This guy's got it all, man. He's really talented. So for me, I was lucky that I found the right teachers. I learned everything I could from them, and I would ask them a lot of questions. I'm always trying to expand my vocabulary. And to do that, what I did is I wanted to learn different styles, not just metal. I wanted to learn funk. I wanted to learn jazz, and I wanted to work on my weaknesses. And when I started lessons with Michael, my weaknesses was the reading of the music, the drum notation. So he helped me with that. Also, I had to learn my rudiments. At the time, I was good at double kicks. I could play single stroke rolls, but I didn't know anything about paradiddles or six stroke rolls or flams. So I worked on all that stuff. And those were the things that I could say some other metal drummers didn't have. I wanted to have that. I wanted to have an arsenal of all of these cool tricks I could pull out of my toolkit and really show people, I and really show people I have a little bit more than most metal drummers. And that was from learning these different styles, working on my rudiments, really sitting in my drum room and trying to get the details, not just playing, but constructing parts using all of these things I learned and adding it to the metal drumming to give it a unique edge. And I feel all my favorite drummers, they did this too. They had a little bit more than just single stroke rolls. They had a lot of tasty chops and cool ideas. And that is what is something that stood out to me that I wanted to do. Now, another thing I did was I always tried to network. I always tried to figure out how can I get this band or myself more of these opportunities. And to do that, I realized you need to email people. You need to get on the social media platforms and connect and introduce yourself. And sure, at first, it was a little bit of a, questionable thing. Like, I used to psych myself out, like, why would they respond to me? What are they gonna do if I message them? But I got over that very quickly, and it's a numbers game. Not every email or every message did I get a reply, but I knew if I did 100 of them, I'm gonna at least get, 4 or 5, and hey, if I'm lucky, I'll get 50 replies. That's a 1 out of 2 kind of thing. So I just pretty much worked on a numbers thing. The more I did, the more chances I would, succeed. And I didn't get too focused on the rejection. I got focused on the success and the small wins I would celebrate. And that would give me a great high, a real big dopamine release. And that kept me going. If I was too focused on all the times I got rejected, I wouldn't have kept going. I would have given up and I probably wouldn't have much success. It's all about your focus. So focus on the things that, you know, f- so focus on the things that you do right rather than the things you do wrong, but focus on the things that aren't working and look for solutions. Another thing I did is I really tried to work on the way we started the set. How can we start off and grab their attention? So we would usually have these openers. Uh, so we'd usually have these intros, which we would make and spend hours on, really getting the crowd ready. So when we hit the stage, they were wondering what's going to happen. What is this going on? So if there's another bit of advice I can give you is work on your set. Work on how you're going to start the performance, how you're going to end it, what's the middle of it, and what is the parts that kind of slow down and speed up. So if there's a slow song, you might want to follow with the faster song and you want to get the crowd moving. So we'd always try and have these elements where there's crowd participation. That way the crowd is part of the experience. We're not performing to them, we're performing with them, and it's a energy exchange. Another thing I always focus on Another thing I always focused on was how can I find what is the best gear and what are the ways to get my gear and what are the things I can do to get my gear to sound better and work better for me. So I was always on the forums, I was always online researching, reading up, looking at what my favorite drummers did, what was the gear they used, what was the advice they'd given people, and I would always read the modern drummers and at the gigs with the drummers were really good, I'd ask them, what were you doing there? How did you do this? What do you think about these cymbals? Or what do you think about that drum kit? I was always open to learning and always asking questions. I was always open to learning and asking questions. And that's a skill that I had to build. I didn't start off being confident. I was really nervous. But the more I did it, the more I started to get used to it. And the more I could actually open up and talk to these musicians. And a lot of the jitters and nerves would go away. But also, I didn't come across asking like, demanding things. I wanted to compliment them. I wanted to give good energy back. So I was a likable person. And I wanted to really be able to build these friendships with these other musicians and these fans. So if there's one thing that I really tried to focus on and improve on, it was my energy. I wanted to be a good, well rounded drummer, have good energy, and really showed that I was happy to meet people. I wasn't standoffish. I was very talkative and easy to approach and talk to as well. Another thing that I really did, which not every drummer or musician does, is I said yes to a lot of different bands and a lot of different projects. I felt the more I could perform with different people, the more I can try new things and build these relationships with the community and also be able to, do these different styles. I wasn't caught up on one style or one band. I was always continually trying new things. And at one point, my schedule was insane. Every day of the week, I was practicing with a different band. And not just that, once I hit, 18, 19, I was lucky enough to ask to get a job at Drum City. So at first, I was working in the drum shop, surrounding myself with other drummers, learning things from the other people that worked there. I was tuning drum kits, I was watching drum DVDs in the background, learning from them, soaking it all up. The best players in the world, they were playing behind me on the TV. So I was always listening to what's going on, what makes them so good. I was really consuming a lot of drums 24/7. And then eventually I ended up getting a room upstairs at Drum City and was teaching there. So they had the drum shop downstairs, they had the teaching academy upstairs. I had my first opportunity to go halves with Violet. She was a drum teacher that was up there. She would teach in the day, I would teach in the night. So I'd finish my job at Drum City. I'd go up and have a few lessons. And the way I got those students was they would come into Drum City, ask for a teacher, and I said, "Hey, I can teach you." So I pretty much said yes to a lot of things at the start of my career. I always took on new students, always jammed with new musicians, and really gave it everything I had. And this is one thing I realized really fast-tracked my progress was I was putting myself out there and doing a lot every week. I was a very busy drummer. I was teaching, I was still getting lessons from other people, and I continued to play all these gigs in all these different venues. Even after I'd done my world tours, recorded with these producers, I was still doing multiple gigs in smaller bands, the bigger bands, and at one point I had looked back on all the achievements I did in that one year. And with 8 Foot Sativa alone, we had done 135 gigs in one year. And that's just 8 Foot Sativa. That doesn't mention my other bands, which, I was doing gigs with them as well. So this is something I really was like doing a lot of time. And that's how I honed my skills. That's how I built my profile out with other musicians knowing me. I was playing all the time, playing everywhere. And the way I could do that is I needed to save up and get a vehicle. And this is something I wouldn't have been able to do if I didn't have my own vehicle. Being a drummer, I needed a big vehicle. So I got a van. And this wasn't the coolest van. I kind of got made fun of for having this big, what we called a family mover. It was a Nissan Serena, bright blue. You wouldn't think this, 17-year-old kid would turn up driving something like that. You think it was a full family, but here I am driving this kind of funny vehicle. But hey, it worked. It got my drums from one place to another. I even had enough room to put in some of the other members' equipment. And I was happy to do that. I was happy to drive. I was happy to, put in the gas and maybe I'd ask them to chip in. But, this is something that if I didn't have these, this is something that wouldn't have worked out so good. If I didn't have a vehicle, I would have struggled to been able to perform. And some of these bands, the practices were remotely situated somewhere away from where I live. So I had to travel there, I had to be organized, and I had to be reliable. So that's another thing. Make sure you have a vehicle, make sure it can transport all your gear, and maybe some of the other band members' gear. That way, you're an asset to the band. They're going to utilize the ability that you can drive there. So you can't be getting drunk either, or you're not going to be able to drive. You've got to be reliable and you have to be willing to do that. But after a while, I probably stopped being as, willing to do all the work. But in those very first few years, I was ready to go. I was always saying, yep, let's do it. I'll do that. Let's go. And that's why they gave me these opportunities because I was willing to do the work. So yeah, here I am, maybe 6 years down the track, got to play in my favorite band, did some world tours, did some recordings, and now I've already done a lot of big gigs opening for some of my favorite artists. I got to perform with, Megadeth, Rob Zombie, all these bands we were sharing the stage with, and I got to meet my idols as well. That was huge. And that was something I would dream of as a kid. I always thought one day I'm going to get up there and I'm going to share the stage with all of these legends and I'm going to be just as good and just as deserving to be appreciated and feel like that's my stage, that's my band. We belong here. So I don't think I could have done that without a bit of self-belief and an imagination to really close my eyes and picture myself doing this stuff, you know? Uh, and one thing I did is I would rip out these posters out of the magazines. I would put them on the wall and I would look at them and be like, I'm going to do that one day. These are my idols. And I would worship the, these are my idols. And I would pretty much these are my idols, and I would focus on, imagining that's going to be me up there. So a lot of that was manifestation, a lot of that was positive thinking, and just having the mind to go, this is possible. If I keep dreaming of it and I keep working hard, I'm going to get it. And what do you know? I got it. All my favorite bands, all my favorite drummers, I've met them, I've shared the stage with them. It's been huge, That's something I never thought would have happened if I didn't have some hope and some dreams and self belief. So, if anything, I would say dream big, visualize, and create these images in your head. If I hadn't thought, I would have been able to do this, I wouldn't have probably done it. But because I was, visualizing and having a dream and having hopes, I did it. Another thing I would suggest is make time to actually dream. Make time to listen to these albums and imagine your band is going to be up there performing with them because, that is part of the process. You have to use your imagination. So yeah, thanks for watching. This is my first video. If you made it all the way through, feel free to comment any questions or any achievements you've done. I'll personally go through and reply to each one of you. And I'd love to hear where you're from. What do you do? And yeah, let's connect. Let's build that community and never give up. I hope the motivation for you is something you found in this video to keep you going. And I hope you dream big and you believe in yourself and take a chance on yourself and you work hard and you have a vision and you stick to it and you keep practicing and keep putting yourself out there.